Hello and welcome to episode, I think this is 5 or 6 of the Smaulgld Subscriber Sound Off series. Today we have with us Karl. Karl, how long have you been a subscriber to Smaulgld?
Well, I first noticed your account when you were playing the Nutcracker ditty, and I made a comment about that, and that
That's
immediately
right.
caught my attention. So it's been about a year. I guess time flies.
Yeah, you know, that was before I had Mark Battaglia's wonderful intros. I was trying to pick out tunes myself to play, and you did pick up on my rudimentary piano playing, and that was indeed the Nutcracker. I haven't used that one in a while, so you have been with us for a while. Thank you very much for that. And you want to just tell us a quick bit about yourself and how you came about to start following the economy and the gold and silver markets.
Well, first of all, just a real brief history. I grew up in what apparently was a middle class family, bungalow in Buffalo. Both parents were physicians, but we never had any wealth or displays, ostentatious wealth displays, anything like that. My brothers were all mechanical engineers, so we were a pretty nuts and bolts family, and not extravagant, not flashy, no fancy cars. So I grew up with that, and I grew up in a pretty privileged education system up in the Northeast. And finally got into medical school, became an orthopedic surgeon, and life, I like to kid everybody. I said, by the time I got out of medical school, I thought I had the world by the balls. And now what happened to me was I had a bad event in my practice, which basically was a career ender, destroyed my orthopedic surgery career. I limped through until about last year when I could go no further. But licensure board action resulted from this event. It was an earth shaker, and it suddenly, this happened back in 1991, totally rearranged my thinking. I went through all the legal system, and I realized we are in a without rule of law system way back then. And so I suddenly, my whole life changed, and I became very conservative. It was about preserving my wealth and just maintenance. And I think if I'd gone on to an orthopedic career, I would have done all the things you see the doctors used to be able to do, and fancy cars and fancy houses, and well, none of that.
Now, Karl, during that time period, we're talking about the early 90s when you had these events, these life-changing events. What did you do for self-education for your finances? But this is pre-internet, this is pre-YouTube. What did you have some background?
Absolutely nothing. I was just as dumb. I didn't know. My parents didn't tell me anything. I was indoctrinated. I took history and took some economics there in the college up in the Northeast, and they mentioned, I think, Keynesianism, but never the Austrian economic school of thought, Rothbard von Mises. I took a course, kind of had a inkling. I said, the world, how can it keep growing like this? And I took an economics course, The Limits to Growth. I remember the book. It had the plug in the wall socket with a whole bunch of other plugs piggybacked onto it. So I had a little bit of an inkling, but there was absolutely no education as far as what was the Federal Reserve. If you asked me 10 years ago, I don't know. I think it's the government. They print the money and give it to the Treasury, and they spend it. That was about the level of it. So very unsophisticated.
Okay, and so when did you start your journey towards understanding more about the financial system? And then, of course, where did that lead you to your views on gold and silver?
Well, after this disaster, and I saw all the legal shenanigans and everything, I kind of got into the I guess the best way to describe it is I kind of became one of those, got into the survival mode. I started reading James Wesley Rawls, and I kind of got into that. I got sidetracked there, and he mentioned silver, and then I started looking. I remember reading Nouriel Roubini. He was the one who called for the big collapse in the real estate 2007. But at the same time, he was not a gold bug.
No, absolutely not.
No.
He thought gold was ridiculous.
Yeah. So a confusing set of signals there.
So let me ask you then. So, and I agree with that. You know, you hear somebody talk, and maybe they make sense on one specific topic, but perhaps their worldview doesn't jibe with yours. What did you go through, and how did you kind of winnow out to determine what you were going to listen to? How did you develop your filter, and then how did you develop your own point of view?
Well, a part of it was just hard knocks. I looked like a genius. I got out of the stock market in 2007. One of my classmates who was from college, who was the what is he? He was the chief economist for Fannie. Said, oh yeah, Fannie's doing great. I was at a reunion, and in the next couple of years, he suddenly resigned. I said, well, that's strange. And a few little things like that. I sold out 2007, looked like a genius, but I never got back in. And I've been sitting in money market ever since, and just drip, drip, drip.
Now, why was it? Because the financial crisis and that jaw-dropping drop in the S&P and the Dow Jones scared you away from it, or because you realized it was fragile? What was the rationale not to get back into the equity markets?
Well, it's a combination of two things. Number one, I was not sure whether I'd be able to earn any money because of all the devastation to my career. So I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to earn an income anymore. So I suddenly became ultra conservative and had to protect, preserve what I had. So that was number one. And then number two, I just said, well, I realized the system has got to correct. At least that's what I thought. I like everybody else, never in my wildest imagination could have believed that the financial powers that be would just print up trillions of dollars and bail out the banks and shuffle all these bad debts and collateralized debt obligations and all this stuff under the Federal Reserve Bank's mattress.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Karl, is that you mentioned, and many people are in this situation either now or at some point in their life, where they need to hold on to their cash, they need to hold on to capital. And it used to be you could put it in the money market, you could put it in the bank and get a rate of interest. And now there's this sense that you are missing out, and they've created this, you are missing out unless you have it in some type of investable or speculative asset. And you know, if you just left the money in the S&P since 2008, you've made 2 or 3 times your money. If you had invested in stocks that don't have any earnings, you would have made money. And it's almost like you're punished for sitting on the sidelines and holding on to your capital until your income comes back, or you know, things change. And so then the next thing you would think, and I thought this, that well, you know, I don't trust the stock market, and I know that you need to get some type of pop for your money. If they're going to print up all these dollars, then why not have it in precious metals? Because they can't print those. So when did you start to look at gold and silver as opposed to just the money
gold
market?
And silver? Well, I started understanding just slowly, incrementally, the basis of fiat currency, and I said, no, it's not. It's paper. I started looking at the Federal Reserve Act, and I don't remember ever being taught that in college, and then I just started reading more and more about it until I realized that, hey, this whole system is absolute madness. How can there be anything else other than gold or silver. So I switched gradually over to the precious metals mindset, and then again, though I didn't. It took me a while to realize all the manipulation that is performed on the COMEX, the naked shorts, the paper shorts, the ETFs that were working to decrease the paper or the price of gold. And so it's just been one thing after another that I've had to play catch up over these past years. And it's really been in the last 3 years or so that I realize now all the manipulation that goes on in the COMEX and the paper gold price versus the physical price. So I've just never been able to get caught up with all of these shenanigans, if you will. And
what's your view now as to, you're aware of manipulations, you kind of understand what happens on the COMEX, you realize that the supply-demand dynamics don't necessarily influence the prices of these metals. Does that give you confidence going forward to hold the metals, or are you rethinking other ways of preserving your wealth or making capital appreciation? Or are you sticking with the metals?
Well, again, I'm, as you may sense, I'm a very practical guy, and I on one hand, I ask myself, where do I trust my money more? Sitting in the bank where it can be taken by the bail-ins, or do I feel safer keeping gold stashed under the ground? It was interesting. My mother, she's an anesthesiologist, was back in '82. She had a neurosurgeon brag about, oh yeah, I bought $100,000 worth of gold, and I stashed it in the walls of my home. And when he went on vacation, somebody broke into his house with a metal detector and stripped it all out. Yeah, so that's on my mind. And then I think I talked to you about my parents. They bought 24 ounces of bars, of gold bars, and back in '82, right at the top at 800. And my brother, who was the executor administrator of the estate, took 6 of those from the Bank of Toronto, had little wrappers. And they turned out, he started last year or 2 years ago, he said, hey, I noticed some corrosion. What's this? I said, no, those are counterfeit. So my father had gotten 6 counterfeits. The other 18 are fine. I checked mine, and yeah, but this is always a concern of counterfeiting. And I explained to my daughter, I said, if you ever, for instance, buy or want to sell your gold coin, you want to get immediate cash for an immediate purchase, fiat cash, you go to the store or to the dealer, you ask him, I would like to see one of your gold pieces first. You bring in your, what they call a frisch, I guess, that little assayer that measures by the diameter, thickness, and weight, coordination. And I said, you go and you say, I want to see if yours is real. And then once you see his is real, then you put yours in the same frisch and say, yep, mine is real. Never let him take your coin off the counter. So you'll go to the back room and say, well, I want to check it out for authenticity and assay it and blah, blah, blah. And then in theory, this is pretty paranoid, but in theory, he can just slip you a fake coin.
Exactly.
And then offer you a ridiculous price, which you will refuse. And then you walk out of the store with a fake coin, and he's got your real coin. So these are things that I'm a little anal about it, admittedly, but these are things that I think about. So physically, and I explain to my daughter, I say, there are pros and cons to everything you do, especially in this financial arena. You can't have it, both ways all the time. And
that makes sense. Now, let's look at the difference between some people think that gold and silver and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are, in a sense, two sides of the same coin, one physical and the other digital. I think you don't hold that view. Can you explain the difference between gold and silver and cryptocurrencies, if there is one, other than one being in digital form? And
Well, I don't understand. I'm not a guru by any means of cryptocurrencies. I say that they're the kind of the same side of the movement to get out of fiat currency.
hmm
But the thing is, gold and silver have 5,000 years history. Bitcoin only has what, 10 years,
not even.
and
Right.
so I would call Bitcoin very speculative. It's rocketed up. What did it go up today to? Was it
Almost
2,400?
something,
2,200?
2,200 almost, I believe. Just
Yeah,
shy, 2187 maybe.
yeah. It's just totally a moonshot. But having said that, well, you got other cryptocurrencies which can kind of muscle in. You've got the Ethereum. You've got there are a couple other currencies. So that may suddenly take the wind out of the sails. You never know what the government's going to do. They may, I don't know. And again, I don't know enough about technology to whether they can track each one of these computers, ISP addresses, and that sort of thing. And I've mentioned I'm very concerned about the government's ability to shut down the internet, censor it, and to the point that, I mean, I went and got all three of my ham radio ratings.
There you go.
I've got two Lcraft KX3 portable radios and all the antennas and pan adapters. And I said, yeah, I don't want to be stuck not being able to communicate.
Now, you're talking about communication that way, but you cannot transmit Bitcoin through those mechanisms. And one of the things I'm fascinated with is everyone talks about, well, don't worry about cryptos if the internet goes down or they shut down the internet. They won't do it because everyone does commerce on the internet, and if it went down, you'd have other problems. But I think what people miss, Karl, is that they can just shut you down. They don't have to shut the whole thing down. In other words, they decide you're a bad actor for whatever reason. They just your internet service provider shuts you down. Now, how are you going to transact your business? How are you going to, if you have a cashless society of these digital currencies, if you've been shut out of the system, it doesn't have to be everyone shut out, and that's quite possible. For whatever reason, you're on the wrong side of whoever's in charge of that switch, and
it's a select fire switch.
Exactly, and that hasn't really been addressed. Everybody talks about, oh, if you have a EMP or there's power outages, sure, those are extreme events, but I can see a case where people that are in control of these things can just selectively start shutting people down. They can also shut the exchanges down as well. And that's where most of the value is, because how else do you determine that these currencies are worth this much unless they're trading on an exchange? Well, if they want to shut those down, they know where they are. And, you could say it's decentralized, but it's not. Not if 90% of the trading happens on exchanges, and basically that's what and they know where they are. In fact, in China, from my understanding, is one of the reasons for this big surge in Bitcoin is you're not allowed to take your Bitcoin out of the exchanges. So I guess people are just leaving them in there, and since they're not taking them out, they're not selling them, and maybe that's another reason why the who knows. That's the other thing. You don't know why the cryptocurrencies have taken off. It's not because they're being used. It's not like, it's basically because they're being hoarded. So let's go now to, we're talking about, that's, I think, as you would mention, a bit of hype. What's your view kind of on the alternative financial media, the mainstream media, and their ability to kind of create narratives and generate hype and have people buy into it?
Generally, my impression has been that there is a drift from the alternative media to a bandwagon, what I call the bandwagon effect. It is definitely drifted to the point that everybody's saying the same thing over and over again. Talks get repeated and substituted, injected, and various sites. It's the same thing over and over, and this is why I've kind of backed off of all of these, and that's why I really liked your site. As I made the comment months ago, I said, I want to get the facts, and sometimes the facts are very difficult to figure out, and I am willing to listen to all the versions or all the explanations, and if I give mine, I would like people to tell me, wrong, here's why. But I don't just want them to say, you're crazy, you're wrong, and just leave it at that. I said, no, tell me why am I wrong? Explain.
Well, I don't think they have that interest, Karl, because I did a quick search today, and you could see it all the time, but there is a market. Once you create a narrative, whether it's mainstream media or alternative financial media, once there's a market for a story about a dollar collapse or a game over scenario or skyrocketing silver or their powers that be are losing control, whatever it is, people want to hear that and they want it repeated. So they will listen to the same commentators go on all the different channels repeating that story. And if you want to break into this business, and I've seen it, there are channels that have been launched since mine, and if they have headlines, and they have more, if they have headlines like collapse and losing control and skyrocketing this and why silver's got to go here and gold's got to go there and Bitcoin to the moon, you will get followers. So there is this market. It's kind of market driven that people are addicted.
It's bandwagon effect.
Yeah, and they want to hear it.
Bandwagon.
And then they get and they criticize the mainstream media, people who watch that, for being sheeple, but yet they slavishly follow these.
They're doing the same thing that the mainstream media has done. You go look at the stories, and they're repeated across all the different channels on the mainstream media. The same story, same phrase, same words, parroted over and over again by the commentators. So,
and you got that parallel universe on the alternative media, and I think you can only peel away people one by one. And what's interesting is I think the alternative financial media peeled people away from the mainstream media narrative and just replaced it with another narrative that they now just shake their head, follow, echo chamber, and so on.
Exactly. That's what I think's going on. And I hate to be a stagio fart, but that's kind of the way I'm coming around to this. And is the world going to end tomorrow? Well, maybe, but I can't afford to live my life waiting for that.
Well, it's always been the case that everything could end tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. It's just you can't live in outrageous improbabilities. The sun's going to rise tomorrow. Get out and enjoy your life, and And I tell my daughter, I say, I want you to be aware of this stuff.
Yes.
But don't be aware, but don't let it control your life. Just be aware.
That's wise counsel, Mark, because Karl, because I do see people. It's not just that they're aware; they're addicted to hearing this, and they take great pride in thinking that they're aware when basically they've almost closed their mind off to there being another point of view. So they're no longer aware. They're just steeped in a narrative that there's a collapse coming. And you know what I sense, Karl? I see people repeating things that they were facts, they were true 6 months ago. But they still repeat them as if they're true, and they haven't changed. And the facts have changed, and they refuse to think that that has changed. So, for example, you and I were talking in the pre-interview, China and Russia have added U.S. treasuries. Well, once you get it stuck in someone's head that they're dumping treasuries and that they're buying gold hand over fist, and then they stop buying gold and they start buying treasuries, they don't believe it. They can't believe it. They're conditioned to think, no, all they do, I think you and I had a joke about this once, was that they think that people in China just wake up and the first thing they think about is gold. They're like, where's the gold? Where's the gold? Gotta have the gold. And that's kind of what they've drilled into people's heads, that that the Russians and the Chinese, that's all they think about is gold and crashing the dollar. That's what, like, their purpose of their existence. And I'm just kind of confused that that sells. You keep pushing that narrative and you get viewers. But someone like yourself, like you say, you kind of, when did you start to realize that
I'm upchucking on this a little bit.
yeah, when did you start upchucking on that whole narrative?
It's right around about a year or two ago. It was, I started looking at all these, and I said, "Gosh, these channels, they're all the same. And they're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong." And then I looked at yours, and I made that comment. I said, "Gee, Louis, what a refreshing channel. No hype." And I think I made that comment 2 days before you then made your comment about, if you don't want to hear about the Shemitah, if you don't want to hear about the Grand Canyon supermine, and so I kind of, it was almost, perfect coincidence.
No, your comment prompted me to I had done an introduction to the Smaulgld channel, I think it was 6 months, a year ago, that basically said that you won't hear me talking about the elite and crashing the system and gold in the side of a mountain for the benefit of humanity. I said, you're going to get the numbers as I can find them, and you're going to get as solid analysis as I can give you about gold and silver, but I'm not going to give you endless predictions of why each piece of data is going to mean that gold and silver are set to skyrocket. I mean, today there was a whole bunch of articles again today about it looks good. Bix Weir had one. It looks good for the silver charts, ready to go. These things have been ready to take off for 7 years, but it's always imminent, and the same people go back and they listen, and I don't know. I'm not frustrated because I knew this going in, that if I wanted to, I think you heard the one I did where I created
you made the fake. Yeah, you made the
on April Fools. Yeah. I invented a scenario that showed why everything was going to go.
April Fool. It was April Fool. Yeah.
And you know how many people believe that? I'd say half the people believe that. They're like, oh. And then they were pissed off when they found out it was April Fool's. And then they were pissed off at me for messing with it. I was like, how can you actually believe? You know what I said? Karl? I said that Mountain House would be so precious that you couldn't eat it.
Right.
I mean, how stupid is that? and that the gold and silver, the ratio would be 1 to 1, and silver would be $20,000. People, their tolerance to believe this stuff is very low. I mean, you can, and you know what? The thing about that particular YouTube, it got the highest numbers of views before I took it down of any one I've ever done.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
It got like 7,000 views in like the 12 hours it was up, and it was still going strong. I took it down because April Fool's was over by about 7 o'clock in the evening. So where do you think this is all headed then? You know, you've heard both sides of the story. You've heard my middle side of the story. What do you think, and I'm not going to hold you to a prediction, what do you think is going to happen in the economy the next couple of years and in the gold and silver markets?
Well, it's just like what we talked about. I said there's a big this, and I just call it the game theory. I just think everybody needs to have the system continue on as long as possible, and so I think it's going to. I continue to think it's a slow burn, and my focus is more generational. I'm concerned about what's going to happen to my daughter. She's 13. She's going to be a freshman. I mean, even that speech that Williams from the San Francisco Fed telling the seniors that gold is null and void or irrelevant, or I say, Kirsten, you have to be aware of this. This is what they may tell you. You go out and buy a car. The dealers are not. They're using the car. This is a terrible pun. It's a vehicle to sell you a loan.
Exactly. Well, that's true.
They're selling you the loan. They are selling you debt.
Yep.
You need to understand, first and foremost, the origin of money here in the in the world, the fiat currency from the Fed. You've got to understand the Fed. Everybody's eyes roll. They say, who is this this nut job. But I say you have to understand that first. It's the great enabler for politicians who need to get reelected.
Yep.
Free lunch. They've got to be able to pay for this. They can do it with fiat, but it's a Ponzi scheme. Early on, Ponzi's great for those who get in and collect. It's great. But in the end, you run out of new money, and the thing ultimately breaks down. So when does it break down? I have no idea. I thought I swore that it was going to happen 3 years ago.
Oh, myself included. I agree.
I was just absolutely dead wrong, and so I don't make any predictions now. This could go on for a long time, but it's for lack of a better explanation, I just say, well, it's game theory. It's the And as I mentioned earlier, I said we, the American people, have enjoyed an extraordinary benevolence, a confluence of events, ending from World War II, when we were the only country left standing. We had all the factories. We had two great oceans protecting us. We had the reserve currency, plenty of food, plenty of transportation, good health care. We had good demographics. Everything was going our way. Cheap energy. And now, well,
we have credit. We have credit.
Yeah, now we have credit, and these things we don't have as much now. So we enjoy it. If somebody asks you, what's the most important thing about you, Karl? I say, well, I'm a white male who was born in the second half of the 20th century in the United States of America. Translation, I had a hell of a privileged upbringing. I was brought up at the best time in the history of mankind. And I mean, that sounds kind of, theatrical, but I think that may wind up being the case.
Well, you're right. In a way, there's a Pearl Jam song mentioning that, if you're born during that time period, it was a lottery ticket. You won the lottery by being born. You could have been born in 15th century, I don't know, Greece or Morocco or somewhere where, your life expectancy was 26 years old. And
30.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, Karl, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I hope you come back, and thanks very much for joining me.
I really enjoy your blogs, and I tell you, I've reminded you once already, but you should really write a financial history book. I mean, I really enjoy these the history of finance and how you look at it from a historical point of view, American history and financial. I never had that in my high school or college. It was inelastic demand.